So yeah, the next part will be more about triggers, because they're a little bit more complicated, and there is potential that I'm going to make mistakes in the triggers and have to backtrack a little bit. They take a little bit more brain power than just sticking Fat Bald Man onto a flat piece of grass. The first one is probably the most complicated. Philippe says, how to make King of the Hill with Wonder in the middle. So I think he's referring to make a King of the Hill map where you control the Wonder, and then whoever controls the Wonder has a countdown, and then some trigger happens. It's not exactly something you want to do in Scenario Editor. I'm not sure how it will work, but I understand the general principles enough. Like, it's not going to be perfect, but it does allow for some variability, and that's kind of what the scenario editor is for, is changing things up. Neat. So it still has spaces for each of the 8 players, even though this is a tiny map size. And we're going to go ahead and make our monument in the middle. So probably just make a... Oh, this looks nice. Let's turn off overlap. There we go. And I think this can be given player colors. So this will work nicely. And it does have attack too, so it can help you defend your King of the Hill, which is new. Let's go ahead and move you, and we'll delete the stone and gold mines for now. Oops. Move you back, click and drag. Okay, and we have each of our players already set up. That's the power of generate map. Ready to start in Dark Age. I want to test this real quick, just so we have a starting baseline. Scout moving along. Coming up to the top of Kilimanjaro. You know, he's actually moving pretty fast for getting all the way to the top. And look at that. So we now have this castle. We can garrison our scout in it. And if another player came along, they wouldn't be able to take this over. It is our castle now. We were the first one to discover it. And that's not exactly how we want this to be set up. King of the Hill is once your unit leaves and another unit comes, they can take control of this. So we have the baseline flowchart to try to explain how we have to go about this. Like the different states of who has control and such. So let's start with a rounded rectangle. How about that? Cool. So if player 1 still has the unit there, he controls it. Yeah, pretty simple. So you would still see that it's blue, but you would say you change the status to unoccupied, and that means while the status is unoccupied, anyone else can bring their unit in and take over. Well, if no is not really an option here. It's just going to keep checking if unit's present, and it doesn't do anything if you have no. From yes up to player controls. And so here we have one for each different player. So I'm going to do player 2 just to demonstrate. Wonderful. Okay, this is a terrible flowchart, but change status to unoccupied is, I guess, the start state. And then if there's a unit present, it comes down here. And then depending on which unit it is, it gives control to another player. There doesn't have to be only one player under the monument for them to take control. It just gives it to any of the players under the monument once the player controlling leaves the monument. So this flow chart actually will work. All right, now that we got that modeling out of the way, I'll put my flow chart over here, and we can try to actually do this in triggers. So where to start? I guess we're going to have the start state. So we're going to call this start state, and that's going to be that it's unoccupied. So we'll put in the description, that's just for us to remember. And it doesn't mean that no one has control. It just means that there are no units underneath or within the area of the monument. So we haven't declared where the area is yet. Yeah, let's start with this other trigger first. So player 1 control. Or first we'll check for unit. And we're just going to make this P1 check unit. Checks for player 1 units. and this it'll be a looping, and it'll be trigger starting state will be on. So these triggers will only start or will only be active. The check unit triggers for each player will only be active when the area will be unoccupied. But until then, until that happens, it will be the trigger will be turned off. All right, deep breaths, a little bit stretching because my mind's taking a toll on this one. Oh, that is a condition, yeah. New condition. Objects in area. And so we're going to, we have to drag from we'll drag from the, set area. So we'll make a 2-tile area all around the monument, this beautiful castle. And we're going to be check for player 1, and we're just gonna have any unit in that area. And we're gonna double check go to area just to make sure that this worked, because sometimes it gets bugged out. A new effect will be, what do we say in the flowchart? If we have player 1 has a unit, you change the status to occupied, and we also, or sorry, that's unoccupied. Player 1 controls. So we're gonna turn that trigger on, which we haven't created yet. So let's go ahead and create that. Player 1 control. Player 1 controls the monument. Starting state is off, looping is on. Well, I guess it depends what the effect is of control. Like if you're giving 5 gold every second, then you might want to have looping on. But if you just want them to have an attack buff to their units, then you wouldn't have looping on, because you just set the attack buff once and it'd be fine. So this could be yes or no, depending on how we need it. So yeah, player 1 control, that's good. So the effect is that we are going to start another trigger. All right, I'm just going to Google this. That's what you do when you're scripting. Well, no, it's not even scripting, it's just doing triggers. Turn on trigger with another trigger. Oh, deactivate and activate. There we go. So we want to activate trigger. Boom. Activate trigger. And we're going to actually change this to not unoccupied, but because it could still be unoccupied. Oh no, unoccupied is correct. Unoccupied. There we go. Apparently I can't like think mathematically, logically, and speak English at the same time, or type in English. Finding out new things about myself every day. Why is this? So this is still red, which means there's something wrong with it. So maybe I need to have quantity 1, and so there we go. Now it's green. So -1 was actually just a placeholder. I believe 1 will be 1 or more than 1. So yeah, we have check unit functions, and when it happens, wait, did I? There we go. Player 1 check unit. When objects are in area, it will activate the trigger, but we have to decide which trigger it activates. So we want it to activate player 1 control, and we want it to deactivate the unoccupied trigger. So deactivate trigger unoccupied, because we're saying player 1 has control. And the effect here is going to be text. Change view will work. I can't find it, but this will demonstrate for testing purposes. And we're going to set the location right there. That's not actually where we want to reset. Set location. I want it to like have it the castle in the middle of the screen. So I want actually the tile behind the castle, I think. Nope. Okay, that looks alright. So when player 1 has control, we're also going to have a new effect that we're going to change view to player 1's town center. And this is, again, just to test it. So when we test it, we plan to have our scout go to the monument. This is our starting state, unoccupied. The other ones are starting state need to be off. There we go. So unoccupied, and when it's unoccupied, we actually have to have a new effect where we activate the other triggers checking for whether there's a player. So activate trigger, player 1, check for unit. So it's going to keep checking if player 1 has a unit. And it'll do the same thing for each of the other players as well. And then once our scout arrives, it will detect it with the condition objects in area. It will activate the player 1 controls, and it should send us change our view back to the town center. Whereas unoccupied, it would send it to here. So if another player comes and takes control and we had a trigger set up, then it would set us back to unoccupied. Actually, it'll send us to unoccupied at the start of the game. Let's make sure that this is not looping. Okay, good. Otherwise, it would just force our view to stay on this monument until that was done. So yeah, scout arrives, or at the start of the game. This is the starting state. We change view here. It just happens once. It activates player 1 check unit. Player 1 check unit will, once the objects are in area, so the scout arrives, it will activate the trigger player 1 control and deactivate the unoccupied trigger, which means it doesn't. We actually have to deactivate all the other check unit triggers as well, but we haven't made those yet, so that's not important. Anyways, enough jabbering. Let's test it. Save obviously, and then test it. So we're forced here. We don't have it visible, so it doesn't mean anything, but we were forced there when the unoccupied trigger ran. And I'm going to type in Polo. So, Marco, I mean. And so once our scout gets to this 2 tile mark, we should be able to. So I'm going to send my scout right here, just outside the 2 tile mark, and he shouldn't be able to access anything. Shouldn't do anything. Oh, so this is looping. So you can see I can't force myself out of this image. It's just forcing my scout there, or my view there, back to my town center. I didn't think I left it on looping. I'll have to double check that. Oh, it's because my scout was still in the area. So if my scout left, if I send it back to my town center, then that would be off. So what we actually have to do, see, this is what you find out in testing. That's why testing is important. If we go to triggers, when player 1 controls it, we need to stop checking for units. So it's actually in here that we are going to, this is completely unnecessary actually, to deactivate and occupy, because it only happens once. It's not looping. If it was looping, then we'd have to deactivate it. But player 1 control, we're going to, oh, this was looping. Okay, that explains that. So it changes his view of the monument, and then here we could have turn off the check unit anywhere else, here or in player 1 control. I think I'm going to do it in here. It'll be a bit simpler maybe. But we're going to set up player 1, do everything from player 1 first, and then we'll copy into player 2 and all the other players. So new condition. Well, what do we want to happen when player 1 takes control of the monument? That's the first question. Let's go ahead and actually have a looping effect. Let's remove this change view effect. we can just make this an effect here that just happens once. Wait, why is this looping as well? Because yeah, this condition, this doesn't have to be looping. So we will have a effect. So player 1, we check the unit. Once the unit arrives, I guess we can do a message. What was it? Chat. Send chat. Source player 1. I have the monument. You plebs. There we go. So yeah, that's what happens when they gain the monument, and then the effect to player 1. I have this looping, right? Yeah. So they're going to have a constant effect, and that effect is going to be. I could have a timer and then just declare victory for that player, because that's what's supposed to happen. Oh, tribute. So we're going to do food storage. I think that's, so source player is going to be Gaia to player 1. We're going to give them 5 food every time this runs. I'm not sure how often this runs. It might generate very quickly, but I think it's time for another test. Scout slowly arriving. I don't know if it's like horrific or like ready for a drum and bass beat. Oh, but we know what the food storage thing does. So maybe that's not exactly the right way to give people resources, because it's going to be annoying. You're not going to be able to hear anything going on. So tribute's probably not the best way to do it. You probably want to do it in some other method. But for testing, it helps because we know exactly when it works, because we hear that annoying sound over and 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 over again. Triggers seem to be working. I'm gonna change the tribute trigger to something a little bit less annoying. Just camels. Camels seems like the right object. I don't know what facet means. Maybe that's rotation. So it won't create more objects if that spot's already claimed, or there's already a unit on it or a building on it. But let's go ahead and test. We hear the camel noise. There we go. So as long as we're off this tile, we get more camels. So we have a good way to test that. And now we can copy the triggers. So player 1 check units. Let's copy. And now it's called trigger 3, but you can see it does the same thing. So we're going to call this P2 check unit. Change the description. Raise it up. And we just do that over and over and over again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're just changing the name right now. We're not actually changing the effect. So this still looks for player 1's unit. So we have to go in. Let's organize this a little bit. There we go. So player 2 check unit. The area is going to be the same, but we're checking for player 2's unit. The trigger we're going to activate is going to change as well. So it's going to go to player 2 control instead of what we have right now. Send chat will be switched to player 2. So we'll have to come back in here and change these a little bit. Do I have this as a 6-player map? Oh, I do. Okay. That's just going to make it easier for me. Same thing applies if it was 8 people, but a little less repetition. Let's see. And then we have to copy and paste player 1 control, which is just, yeah, what happens, the effect that happens once player 1 takes control. So in this case, it's creating camels, and we'll have to change the position of that camel. So yeah, copy the trigger. So player 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool. And everyone should be set up. The only thing I didn't put in this is a timer to count down and who has control. So that's one thing I probably should have done beforehand. But I think that creates an extra trigger for each, like the win condition trigger for each person. So I'll just do it for player 1 because player 1's all that matters, and I've already explained that copy and pasting of triggers, but it would have to be done for all the other players. So we're going to have a new trigger called P1 timer. So this is counting down how long, counts down how long P1 needs monument control to win. And the condition would be a timer, and we still have it as 10. So I think this timer here would be extra. This will be displayed. This timer here will be displayed on the screen, whereas this timer is just kind of in the back. It's the condition, and then the effect once the timer is up would be declare victory. Yeah, declare victory for player 1. What? Why is there a box? Okay, it's odd. Or I guess you could declare victory without actually making someone victorious. So anyways, this needs to be activated and deactivated. So player 1 control, create object, and new effect is activate trigger. And the trigger it's activating is player 1 timer, because player 1 timer, oh, I have to set the starting state as off as well. All these should be starting state off, yeah, okay. So player 1 timer will be turned on by player 1 control, and then if it's unoccupied, we need to deactivate, or no, that's not quite true. It's not here. It's if player 1 takes control, we have to deactivate the condition. What was it? Deactivate trigger? Yeah, deactivate trigger, player 1 timer. So if someone else takes control of the monument, you have to deactivate the timer for player 1 or whoever had control previously, so they can't continue counting down and win. So technically I would have to do this for every player, and then player 1 control I'd also have to have like deactivate player 2, player 3, player 4 timer. Yeah, so that's that. Looping is off. So it should be just 10 seconds. Let's go ahead and save and test it, and I think that would be King of the Hill in triggers. Off we go, up the mountain. What was that? It's a kind of sounded like a Eurasian collared dove. A little bit out of place in Kilimanjaro. I don't see a timer. Okay, 10 years is very quick, but it worked. We were declared victorious.